Smile and the world smiles with you. Sing a song. Don't be weary, just be cheery all day long.
Greg has worked really hard for farmers, ranchers, and worked on natural resources throughout Oregon. He's currently worked very hard on forest processes that are going on to try to make sure that those forests that are subject to forest fires are cleaned out. He works real hard on the sage grouse, which is always a topic that is dear to the hearts of those of us in Lake County. It's my pleasure to welcome fellow Rotarian Kurt Walden.
Eunice, thank you very much for that kind introduction. Thank you all for getting about a 30% on the test. It's a delight to be back here, back in Lakeview, back in Lake County. I think it's my second trip this year, which is rapidly this year coming to a close. So I bring you the best Christmas present that you could have, and that is that Congress is done for the year. You can dig up the little jars of money in the backyard for your, children in your rooms. Everything's going to be safe now. Anyway, off of Sony and movies and all that, not the real world issues that we face in the 2nd Congressional District, which is 20 counties. Actually, 20, but although Josephine County, we just have grants passed, so we don't. It's sort of 19.
I wouldn't be proud of that.
Yeah. But we raised some of the highest value cash crops over there, which apparently now are even going to be legal. Wow. Anyway, sage grouse. So in the last few weeks, we've come together on some pretty big issues. Maybe not in the best way possible, but they did get done as we kind of careened to a close in Washington. In the massive, and I will tell you, massive spending bill that did pass in the end were some really, really important provisions that a number of us from the West worked on to get in there. One of which is to prevent the Fish and Wildlife Service from doing any work until September, because that's the length of this bill, on listing of the sage grouse. It allows for all the collaborative work to continue on the ground, however, and we put $15 million more into that restoration work and the conservation work. We got to get ahead of this, and that's been our goal all along, is to get ahead of and prevent a listing. And what we feared most was the federal agency would simply go ahead and drop the nuclear warhead on us and list. And there's been a lot of really important and collaborative work done on the ground, led by John O'Keefe and others, and our OSU researchers, frankly, in Burns and elsewhere, to help us better understand how to manage our way through this. If for some reason the sage grouse gets listed across the Great Basin, we're in real trouble. We're in real trouble. This will make the listing of the spotted owl and its impact on the timber industry look like child's play. So it's really, really essential that we stay ahead of this. So not only did we stop Fish and Wildlife from moving forward in any capacity toward a listing, but also got $15 million more for VLM for conservation to help us stay ahead of it. We got some really important provisions on grazing that I think make a huge difference for us. We will allow grazing to continue on allotments if the agency hasn't done their work to facilitate permit renewals. One of the issues we've run into is the permittees doing everything they're supposed to do. The agency doesn't get its work done, and then the permittees in peril. And it shouldn't work that way. And so we not only said, no, they get to continue to graze while you do your work, we also put in place some additional funding to help reduce the backlog of the processing of those permits. And another issue that's been especially important in our part of the world, after these fires we've had, and I know you're all painfully aware of them, many of the ranchers lose their allotments for a period of time because of the fire damage. And so then we go to work to say, aren't there some vacant allotments you could allow them to transfer on? And that's always a hassle, and there's a question about, well, can they, can't they? In this bill, we got a provision that directs the BLM and the Forest Service to make vacant grazing allotments available to permittees who are unable to use their current allotment due to either fire or drought. And so clearly with the drought we've had, with the fires we've had, It's been an ongoing problem, and this will give us some additional flexibility that is really important. Big fight we've had over the last year or so, resulting in a tense and somewhat heated meeting with the BLM director in Burns recently, involves the old Schemes Act legislation, which I helped write. In that, we said if you're going to create cow-free wilderness, which we did, that the liability to keep the cows off rests with the BLM. And they had to fence the cows off. That was the trade-off. It's in the statute. Well, unbeknownst to me, about a year or so ago, the BLM, new people, didn't understand what we'd done, told a rancher, you got to fence your cows off this area, in direct violation of what the law says. And when they started to do that to another rancher who contacted me, and I said, whoa, wait a minute. It's not often you can claim, the legislative intent because you wrote the law, but I wrote this law. I didn't know the legislative intent. Well, they didn't want to hear that. And I got really incensed because it's like, wait a minute. I went to DeFazio, who was part of this, my Democrat colleague from over in Springfield. He said, I didn't necessarily agree with it, but yeah, that is what we agreed to. He said he didn't like it, but he said that's what we agreed to. Yes, that was the intent. We both went to BLM. They still were hemming and hawing around. So we put language in the spending bill that says the secretary shall be responsible for installing and maintaining any fencing required for resource protection within the designated no livestock grazing area. I mean, that's what the law says. We came back and put language in that says the BLM is directed to comply with the act. Basically, pay attention and to implement this as written. And so we made good progress there. And now we've also talked to the head of BLM, and he said, well, they're going to get back to me on how they're going to deal with it. Really? I need a DA. On a final note, just to tell you how goofy budgeting can be in Washington, several years ago I wrote some legislation to free up something called Spectrum for broadband. So all your wireless devices that operate through the airwaves use Spectrum for phone or email or texting or whatever. There was a swath of Spectrum the federal government held that we thought they could release. And so we put in this piece of legislation that when the Department of Defense and these other agencies come together, that Spectrum would be up for auction. The Congressional Budget Office told us that had no value because it would never happen. And so they gave us a 0 score. We pursued that. I put together a task force of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. We made the agencies come together and meet with us every month until they worked it out. And they did. And then the Federal Communications Commission put this Spectrum up for auction, which the Congressional Budget Office told us had 0 value. As of last night, this auction that's now gone on about 3 weeks, this is how these go, has generated proceeds of $43.9 billion. $billion. And what it does, we've already being Congress spent money, but that's okay. So in this big program, we said we're going to upgrade law enforcement communication capabilities so they'll have interoperable broadband communication. This was a big issue coming out of the 9/11 report that our first responders could communicate in New York. Well, it happens everywhere. So we want to upgrade to a higher level of communication capability, make it interoperable, so if you have some catastrophic event or somebody's on call into Medford to hear something, everybody can communicate, especially big in our bigger cities. So this now is completely funded through these proceeds. We did a couple other things, good policy, but the bulk of the money goes to deficit reduction. The bulk of the money goes to deficit reduction. So we've already paid for the things we said we would do to help law enforcement at all, and the bulk of the money's gone to deficit reduction. Now, the rest of the bill is where they scored that we would get $25 billion. And that's from selling broadcast spectrum, television spectrum. For those, it's a forward and reverse auction. So if you're a TV station or market and you decide to sell your spectrum, you'll get paid and the government will get paid. The way it's complicated, but supposedly it all works out. So CDO gave us a score of $25 billion for that spectrum. That was the one designed to pay for first responders and pay the deficit. So we've already put $43.9 billion. There's some credits, so it'll probably be a little less than that. All the way through, and we still have this other auction that will take place probably next year that will also generate revenue. I think all of which will go into deficit reduction, or virtually all of them. So, I mean, there are some things happening that are positive. You'll probably never read about them because nobody's doing a filibuster or, beating each other over the head about it. And it'll probably never make talk radio. But it's actually good for the country, good for our first responders. Will make a difference if that spectrum's made available for all of us to be able to communicate better wherever we are. So let me stop with that. Again, it's an honor and pleasure to be with you as fellow Rotarians. And I've often thought if we just had that four-way test posted behind every committee chairman and speaker and the president of the Senate, it's probably a lot there. Thank you for letting me be with you today. Happy holidays to all of you.
Thank you, Congressman Walden, for addressing